on the volume flex cable, this cable is actually a couple of different things on your phone. If you're trying to talk to somebody on hands-free or the loudspeaker and they can't hear you, this microphone's part of the cable. It's also your connector for your headset. So if you're listening to music or trying to listen to your music through the headphones or through like an audio in your car and you can't hear it, then this could be bad. If you try to silence your phone or toggle the volume, the vibrate switch, and it doesn't work, or your volume up and down button, if those don't work, then this is the cable that you'll want to replace. Now, if all of those don't work, it's probably the plug could be unplugged on the board. So check that plug first. But if you've checked it and it's fine, then we'll show you how to replace all this. So I'll show you a close-up real quick and just kind of go over everything we just talked about. The one thing I did remove on here that you'll have to remove is the Wi-Fi antenna. So you'll remove the screw with the Wi-Fi antenna. If you need how to see to do that, you can go to the antenna repair. But there's your mic, and the mic actually has adhesive on the back of it, and it's kind of stuck to this little housing piece right here. So you'll want to make sure that you'll need to separate the mic as you're removing the headset connector. Those two are together. The cable goes from the mic to the connector, so you'll want to remove those at the same time. And then I'll lift up either on these little, one of these two little these guides for the screws. You can lift that up to get the connector out. Now there's a screw right down here that you can't see, but once we remove the connector, you should be able to get to that screw. And then there's another screw right here, and those two hold the retaining bracket for the vibrate switch. So those two hold that in, and then you have three screws here. You have 1, 2, 3, and those hold down the retaining bracket for the volume up and down button. So we'll remove all these screws, pull the cable out, we'll transfer the the pieces to the new cable, and then we'll start by putting the volume bracket, this piece in first, and then we'll put the module in for or this bracket for the vibrate, the headset, and the mic, and then we should be good to go. So we'll get started right now. So like I said, I've already removed the antenna up here, so we can get down right in one of these little arms right here and just kind of lift that, and as we're lifting it, we're just going to loosen that mic out of there. Once you get that, you should be able to pull it back. Now, another thing that does happen is that you can break off the headset jack for your headphones. You can break that off inside of here, and if that's happened, usually there's a little hole on the back of this, and I'll show you here on the close-up again. So I don't know if you can see that little hole right there, but what you can do sometimes is once you get that out, you can just get that and just kind of push it through the hole, and it should be able to pop your broken piece off. There's kind of the hole right there. So if you need to do that, that's how you can get that out without having to replace the whole entire cable. But if not, then this is how you do it. So once we take the headset out, we'll remove that bottom screw and just keep everything in order. I know I say it a lot, but it definitely does help when you go to put it all back together. And then we have these three screws down here. There's one right under that. Alright. So once we get those out, we should just be able to lift up on that and lift this bracket out as well. It may take you a little bit to wiggle it out, but once you loosen this all up, you should be able to get it out. There we go. And don't worry if your actual buttons fall out. If your vibrate or your volume up and down button falls out, just make sure you put it back in the proper way. And if the vibrate switch one falls out, you want to make sure the little orange piece goes towards the screen, the top of the phone. So if you're not sure which way it goes back in, you just want to make sure the little orange piece goes towards the top, and it should fall right back in place. So we have our new cable right here, and this has, doesn't look the same as this cable, but we'll fold it and bend it and show you how to do all that to get it to fit back in place how it should. So the two things that you want to remember is the retaining bracket for your volume buttons, the way it goes. And usually, whichever way you're going to try to remember it, like here, if it was sitting up against the housing, is that the right side is completely flat and the bottom is longer than the top. So that way, if you put it in a different way, you know that it's not going to line up right. So anyways, so we'll peel this off, and it's just adhesive holding the actual cable onto this little bracket. So we'll set that down. We'll get the new cable and peel that adhesive off. And then when you go to put the new the new cable on, there should be a couple little holes down here, and those are going to line up and correspond with the holes on the bracket itself. There should be two small holes as well, and what those are for is to actually help you line up the cable, so when you go to put this bracket back in place, your volume up and down buttons line up with the buttons that actually push those buttons. So when you push this, and make sure that that actually lines up with that switch, so then it pushes it, because if it's off by a little bit, it won't line up properly, and then your switch may not recoil, or may not work properly. So when you look on the back side of here, you should be able to look through the cable. There should be little holes through the cable. Okay, so we got that one done. Now the other bracket to change over is your vibrate or your silent switch bracket. And really, you want to make sure you take a look at how it goes in, how it lays out, so you change it over properly and it's not on upside down or backwards. Now, one thing with these with this cable is, I'll show you here on the close-up, is that it has these little guides. So there's two little plastic guides, and I'll show you with the new cable. You see on the white paper right there, those two guides. Those guides we're going to put through the guide holes on the bracket, and once they're through, we're actually going to melt them down with our soldering tip to make sure it keeps that bracket and that switch nice and in place, because you don't want that to come apart, because then when you try to toggle it, it could it may not work. So just want to make sure that as we take this off to transfer it over, when we put the new one on, we're going to melt it in place. So I'll show you that in here in just a minute. So once we break the old guides, I'll actually clean this out. You want to get all this old plastic out and just make it as clean as possible. Okay. So we get our new you want to peel the backing off, and then make sure you get that in the right way. And once you have it in, I'll usually just use my tweezers and just kind of pinch that, and I'll show you again on the close-up here. So here's the new one. Not melted yet, but you can kind of see those little guides sticking up a little bit. So with this, okay. Make sure we get it flush. Alright. Now with that, I'll just kind of hold it. I can just kind of push and give it some pressure on there. And with that, now I'll get my soldering iron, the tip. Make sure it's nice and hot. And just roll it over and just kind of melt that down into place. And it doesn't take much to melt it down. And then once you have it all melted, I'll show you again on the close-up here. There it is. So there's the new ready to go silent switch with the bracket and everything that now we can put on. Okay, oops. Alright. So what I'll actually start this, I'll start it with the volume bracket. It's a little easier to start it with that. So I'll peel this backing off, and then we'll fold that piece down and over just to get it in place right there. And then kind of start, I'll just line this guy up. Oops. It may take you a second to get that lined up. But I noticed too, I find it easier when I'm trying to put these little guides in, little retaining guides, is if you start with kind of the bottom first, just to try to slide the bottom of it in first. It will usually line up, and then you can kind of, once you get the bottom in, you can lift it forward and up, and the top should, you know, kind of line up in place. Now you want to make sure, and this is again what I was talking about with those little holes lining up right, is that if it doesn't line up even with the holes, then these buttons won't recoil. So as long as you get those holes lined up evenly, then this should work. We'll put those three in. Now again, remember which way this went in. Usually you want to bend it, and you remember that that one hole, or the one screw, was down here more, and this screw was kind of higher. So you'll notice when you bend and turn your retaining bracket for this, is you're going to want the right side to be higher, left side to be shorter or lower. And it should be just like that. Now maybe a little tricky, you'll have to bend this a certain way, and it may take you a minute to figure out, you know, how to turn it, how to fold it, but what you'll want is your switch to be, on the outside. So you want that switch going against the housing of the phone. And the other thing you want to make sure is that switch is in the down position, because if you try to line it up with the actual switch button itself and it's not lined up right, then obviously it won't fit. So once you get it in there, you just kind of have to work it, and you wiggle it. It should eventually go right into place. There you go. So once you get it in place, you can just use the screw and just kind of secure this. Okay. And secure the top one. There you go. And then again, make sure that it does toggle, which it does. Now, peel all the backing off of the adhesives. This cable right here, you just kind of have to get you'll fold it back in place, kind of on itself, just like that. And then there's kind of a little outline right here. You can kind of notice how it's nice and shiny, and that cable is going to travel or lay right on the shiny part, so you know that you'll get it lined up properly. It just takes a second because it's all sticky and it's kind of hard to maneuver it, but just be careful when you're moving these cables that you don't move them too much, or you're too rough with them, or you could damage them. So once you get these little cables all properly in place, there you go, and they're secured down. Now the other thing in this, this does bend a certain way. Now again, you'll have to kind of flip it around to see which way it goes, but what you'll want is this cable. You want the cable to run up the back side and then wrap around this edge right here. So if you have it spun a different way or something, kind of like that, where the cable looks too twisted, then just keep working it till you get it the proper way. And then again, you'll just want to let me remove this backing real quick. Okay, so once the backing is removed, then you kind of get it ready to get in place. The other thing you'll want to remove the backing for the microphone up here, because when you kind of get it ready to put in place, you can just put the microphone in place as well. And again, it's easier to do actually with the phone on the table, or on a flat surface. I'm trying to hold it to show you, so bear with me. Okay, so the mic is going to kind of go up and kind of at an angle. It'll fold at a 90 degree, pretty much like that. So once you get that kind of in place, you can start to work this the headset jack. And the easiest way to do it's probably to put the top in first, so it slides under these little grooves, little guides up there, and then this mic will need to be folded. Okay, get that mic pretty much in place right there, get the headset connector in place, and then again, this cable should just kind of fold up and around that housing. And then the mic you may need to fiddle with a little bit just to get that to sit right in place, but that should sit right on this little spacer right here, this little housing that's going to allow the sound to travel through. And then the last thing really to do is just to peel this adhesive off, or this backing off down here. Last minute little touch up so you can get that cable lined up. And then the other thing you'll want to do is to peel this old spacer off of your old plug and put it onto the put it on the new plug, just like that. And you can line this up, make sure it's nice and even. But if you do decide to try to move the cable or anything, just be careful that you don't damage it. But the last thing to do is to put everything back together and test it. But that should fix your the mic, the headset connector, the silent switch, or the volume up and down buttons.